My mom chose her new kids over me, threw me out, and told me to figure it out. Now that I'm rich, she wants my money, so I taught her a lesson in karma. Hey Reddit. I'm Alex, 25M, and I've been holding on to this story for years. It all started when I was 17. My parents had been divorced for a few years, and my mom had just remarried. Her new husband, Rick, was one of those guys who looked like he belonged in a luxury car commercial. Polished, smug, and always talking about his legacy. He had 2 kids from his first marriage, twins named Lily and Logan, who were about 12 at the time. At first, I tried to be optimistic. Maybe this would be a fresh start for all of us. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. Rick didn't like me. He'd make snide comments about how I wasn't ambitious enough or how I spent too much time playing video games. My mom, who used to defend me, started nodding along. Alex, you need to grow up, she'd say. Rick's just trying to help. Then came the ultimatum. It was a Thursday night, and I was in my room studying for a history test. My mom knocked on the door and walked in, her face tight like she'd been practicing this speech in the mirror. Alex, we need to talk, she said. I knew it was bad. She only used that tone when something was really wrong. Rick and I have been discussing it, and we think it's best if you move out. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but there wasn't one. What? I finally managed to say. It's just, we need to focus on Lily and Logan right now. They're at a critical age, and Rick thinks it's better if you're not here to distract them. Distract them? I repeated, my voice rising. What the hell does that even mean? She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. Alex, you're almost an adult. You need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. Rick says it'll be good for you. Rick says, I snapped. Since when do you let him make decisions about me? Her face hardened. This isn't up for debate. You have until the end of the month to figure something out. And just like that, I was homeless. I crashed on my best friend Matt's couch for a few weeks, but his parents weren't exactly thrilled about having a stray teenager in their house. I got a job at a fast food place, saved every penny, and eventually rented a tiny studio apartment. It was a dump, roaches, no heat, and a shower that only worked when it felt like it, but it was mine. I dropped out of high school to work full-time. My mom didn't call, not once. The years that followed were a blur of exhaustion and survival. I worked double shifts, taught myself coding at night, and started freelancing as a web developer. By the time I was 22, I'd saved enough to launch my own tech startup. It was a gamble, but it paid off. Big time. Fast forward to last year. My company was acquired for millions. I bought a penthouse, a car, and finally felt like I could breathe. That's when my mom decided to reappear. It started with a text. Alex, it's Mom. Can we talk? I stared at my phone, my stomach churning. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part, the stupid, hopeful part, wanted answers. So I agreed to meet her. She looked older, her hair streaked with gray, but otherwise the same. She smiled when she saw me, like we were just catching up after a long weekend. Alex, you look amazing, she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. What do you want, Mom? Her smile faltered. I wanted to see how you were doing. I heard about your company. I'm so proud of you. Proud of me? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You threw me out. You didn't care if I lived or died. And now you're proud of me? She looked down, her hands twisting in her lap. I made mistakes, Alex, but I'm your mother. I love you. Do you? I asked, because it didn't feel like love when you chose Rick and his kids over me. She didn't have an answer for that. I left without saying a word. A week later, she called again. This time, she got straight to the point. Alex, I need your help, she said. Rick left me. He took the house and everything. I have nothing. I stayed silent. I was hoping maybe you could lend me some money, just until I get back on my feet. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when you realize just how absurd life can be. You're serious? I asked. You want money from me? After everything? My mom hesitated, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Alex, I know I made mistakes, but I'm your mother. Family helps family. Funny, I said. I don't remember you helping me when I was sleeping on a friend's couch and eating ramen for every meal. She didn't respond, and I hung up, but the conversation stuck with me. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Part of me wanted to tell her to go to hell, but another part, the part that still remembered the mom she used to be, wondered if maybe she'd changed. A few days later, I got a call from my younger half-sister Lily. I hadn't spoken to her in years, not since I'd been kicked out. "Alex," she said, her voice small. "It's Lily. I need your help." I frowned. "What's going on?" "It's Mom," she said. "She's really struggling. Rick left her with nothing, and she's been trying to make ends meet, but it's not enough. She's too proud to ask for help, but I'm scared, Alex. I don't know what to do." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Lily, I don't know if I'm the right person to help. Your mom, our mom, made it pretty clear where I stood." "I know," Lily said quickly, "and I'm not asking for her. I'm asking for me. And Logan. We're just kids, Alex. We didn't ask for any of this." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Lily and Logan were innocent in all of this. They were just kids caught in the middle of their parents' mess. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll help. But first, I want to talk to Mom. Face to face." We met at a diner near my old neighborhood. My mom looked tired, her eyes shadowed and her hands trembling as she stirred her coffee. Lily and Logan sat beside her, their faces pale and drawn. "Alex," my mom said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, sitting across from them. "Let's cut to the chase. Lily called me. She said you're struggling." My mom's smile faltered. "I didn't want to bother you. I know you're busy with your company and everything." "Yeah, I am," I said. "But Lily and Logan are my siblings. If they need help, I'll help. But I need to know the truth. What's really going on?" My mom hesitated, then sighed. "Rick left me. He took everything. The house, the savings, even the car. He said he didn't want to be tied down anymore. I've been working 2 jobs, but it's not enough. We're about to be evicted." I leaned back in my seat, studying her. "And you didn't think to call me until now?" "I didn't think you'd care," she admitted. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of all the time she'd chosen Rick over me. But looking at Lily and Logan, I knew I couldn't. "Here's what's gonna happen," I said finally. "I'll pay for a place for you and the kids to live. I'll cover the rent for 6 months. That should give you enough time to get back on your feet." My mom's eyes widened. "Alex, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," I said, cutting her off. "This isn't for you. It's for them." Things were quiet for a while after that. I paid for an apartment for my mom and the kids, and I even set up a small trust fund for Lily and Logan to cover their school expenses. I told myself it was the right thing to do, but deep down, I was still angry. Angry at my mom for abandoning me, angry at Rick for tearing our family apart, and angry at myself for still caring. Then one night, I got a call from Lily. "Alex," she said, her voice shaking, "you need to come over, now." "What's wrong?" I asked, already grabbing my keys. "It's Mom," she said. She's been lying to you." I drove to the apartment, my mind racing. When I got there, Lily was waiting for me outside. "What's going on?" I asked. Lily looked down, her hands twisting in her sleeves. "Mom's been talking to Rick. They're getting back together." I stared at her, my stomach churning. "What?" "She didn't want you to know," Lily said. "She said you'd stop helping us if you found out, but I couldn't keep lying to you, Alex. You've been so good to us, and I just couldn't." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Where is she?" "Inside," Lily said, stepping aside. I walked into the apartment. My mom was sitting on the couch, her face pale as she saw me. "Alex," she said, standing up, "I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me this whole time? That you're getting back with the man who ruined our family?" My mom flinched. "It's not like that. Rick's changed. He wants to make things right." "And you believe him?" I asked. "After everything he's done?" "I don't have a choice," she snapped, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't do this on my own, Alex. I need him." I stared at her. "You had a choice. You could have chosen me, but you didn't, and now you're choosing him again." She didn't respond, and I turned to leave. "Alex, wait," she called after me. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything. I just walked out. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what Lily had told me. My mom was getting back with Rick, the man who had destroyed our family, who had convinced her to throw me out like I was nothing, and she'd been lying to me about it, using my money to keep herself afloat while she planned her reunion with him. It felt like a betrayal all over again, and I wasn't sure I could handle it. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself, but it didn't help. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mom's face, her pleading eyes, her trembling hands. I hated that I still cared. I hated that part of me wanted to forgive her, even after everything. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was Rick. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since the day I'd been kicked out. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, but another part, the angry, vindictive part, wanted to hear what he had to say. I answered. "Alex," he said, his voice smooth and confident, like he hadn't just upended my life all over again. "It's been a while." "What do you want, Rick?" I asked. "I heard you've been helping your mom out," he said, ignoring my question. "That's big of you, really big. I always knew you had it in you." I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm. "Cut the crap, Rick. Why are you calling me?" He chuckled, and the sound made my skin crawl. Straight to the point. "I like that. Look, I know things got messy between us, but I think it's time we put the past behind us. Your mom and I, we're getting back together. And I think it's important that we all move forward as a family." "A family? You threw me out, Rick. You convinced my mom to abandon me, and now you want to play happy families?" "People make mistakes, Alex," he said. "Your mom and I, we've been through a lot, but we're ready to start over. And I think it's time you did too." I didn't respond right away. I was too angry, too hurt. But then an idea started to form in my mind. This might be a chance to make Rick pay for everything he'd done. "You know what, Rick?" I said finally. "You're right. It's time to move forward. Why don't we meet? Talk things out, man to man." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in Rick's head. "I think that's a great idea," he said finally. "How about tomorrow? My treat?" "Sure," I said, my voice calm. "Tomorrow." I hung up and was eagerly waiting for a chance to make him pay. The next day, I met Rick at a fancy restaurant downtown. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a glass of wine in his hand. He looked the same as I remembered, polished, smug, and completely full of himself. "Alex," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "Good to see you." I shook his hand, forcing a smile. "You too, Rick." We sat down and Rick launched into a monologue about how much he'd missed me, how he'd always known I'd make something of myself, how proud he was of me. I let him talk, nodding along and pretending to listen, all the while waiting for the right moment to strike. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rick leaned back in his chair and said, "So, Alex, I've been thinking. Now that your mom and I are getting back together, it's important that we all get along, and I think there's a way we can make that happen." "Oh?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," he said. "I've got this business opportunity, a real estate deal that's going to make us millions. But I need investors, people who believe in the vision, and I think you'd be perfect." Of course, this was why he'd called me. Not because he wanted to make amends, not because he cared about me or my mom, but because he wanted my money. "How much are we talking?" I asked. Rick's eyes lit up. "1 million. Maybe 2. But trust me, Alex, it's a sure thing. You'll double your money in no time." I nodded, pretending to consider it. "Sounds interesting, but before I commit, I need to know more. Why don't you send me the details, contracts, financials, everything? I'll have my lawyers look it over." Rick hesitated, and for a moment, I thought he was going to say no, but then he smiled, his confidence returning. "Of course, I'll have everything sent over by the end of the day." "Great," I said, standing up. "I'll be in touch." I left the restaurant. I knew Rick's business opportunity was a scam. There was no way he'd change that much, but I also knew this was my chance to take him down. A few days later, I got the documents from Rick. As expected, they were full of red flags, shady contracts, inflated numbers, and a whole lot of empty promises. But instead of calling him out, I decided to play along. I called him and told him I was in. "That's great, Alex," he said, his voice filled with excitement. "You won't regret this." "I'm sure I won't. But before we move forward, I need to meet with your partners. I want to make sure we're all on the same page." Rick hesitated, but then he agreed. "Of course, I'll set something up." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Rick's partners turned out to be a couple of shady-looking guys in cheap suits who looked like they'd stepped out of a bad mob movie. They spent the entire meeting talking about how much money we were going to make, but they couldn't answer any of my questions about the actual business. I played along, nodding and smiling, but I was already planning my next move. After the meeting, I went straight to my lawyer. "I need you to look into these guys," I said, handing over the documents. "I want everything, criminal records, financials, whatever you can find." And a few days later, he called me with the results. "You were right," he said. "These guys are bad news. Fraud, embezzlement, you name it, and Rick's been involved with them for years." I felt a surge of satisfaction. I'd known Rick was shady, but this was worse than I'd imagined. "What do you want to do?" my lawyer asked. I smiled. "I want to take them down." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and strategy. With my lawyer's help, I gathered as much evidence as I could against Rick and his so-called partners. We dug into their financial records, tracked their past business dealings, and even uncovered a trail of lawsuits and complaints from people they'd scammed in the past. It was clear that Rick had been running this scheme for years, preying on desperate people who trusted him. But I wasn't just going to expose him. I wanted to make sure he felt the full weight of his actions. I called Rick and told him I was ready to invest. "That's great news, Alex," he said, his voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. "I knew you'd see the potential." "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "But before I transfer the money, I want to meet one more time, just to go over the final details." Rick agreed without hesitation. He was too greedy to suspect anything. The meeting was set for a private room at an upscale hotel. Rick and his partners were already there when I arrived, sitting around a table with glasses of whiskey and smug smiles on their faces. "Alex," Rick said, standing up to shake my hand. "Glad you could make it." I shook his hand, forcing a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." We sat down, and Rick launched into another spiel about how much money we were going to make. His partners chimed in, adding their own exaggerated claims. I nodded along, pretending to be impressed, but my mind was focused on the plan. After about 20 minutes, I interrupted Rick mid-sentence. "There's just one thing I need to clarify before we move forward," I said, leaning back in my chair. Rick frowned. "What's that?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table to him. "This." Rick opened the folder, his expression shifting from confusion to shock as he saw the contents. It was a copy of all the evidence we'd gathered, bank statements, contracts, emails, everything. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "It's proof," I said calmly. "Proof that you've been running a scam for years. Proof that you've been lying to everyone, including my mom." Rick's face turned red, and he slammed the folder shut. "You little..." "Careful," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "You might want to think about your next words, because everything you say right now is being recorded." Rick froze, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Am I?" One of his partners stood up, his face pale. "We're out of here." "Sit down," I said. "You're not going anywhere." The man hesitated, then slowly sat back down. I turned back to Rick. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return every penny you've scammed from people, and you're going to do it quietly, without dragging anyone else into it. If you don't, I'll take this evidence to the authorities, and you'll spend the next decade in prison." Rick stared at me, his face twisted with anger. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won?" "I know I have," I said, standing up. "And if you ever come near my family again, I'll make sure you regret it." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Rick and his partners sitting in stunned silence. The fallout was swift. Rick returned the money he'd scammed from people, but it wasn't enough to save him. Word of his scheme spread, and he lost everything: his reputation, his business, even his so-called friends. As for my mom, she was devastated. She called me a few days later, her voice shaking. "Alex, I didn't know," she said, her words barely audible. "I didn't know what he was doing." "Maybe not," I said, "but you chose him over me, and that's something I'll never forget." She didn't respond, and I hung up. After exposing Rick's scams and watching his life fall apart, I thought I'd feel some sense of closure. But the truth was, I didn't. My mom's betrayal still weighed heavily on me. She'd chosen Rick over me twice. First when she kicked me out, and then when she lied about getting back with him. Forgiveness wasn't on the table. I made sure Lily and Logan were taken care of. I set up a trust fund for their education and stayed involved in their lives. but I kept my distance from my mom. She tried to reach out a few times, leaving voicemails and texts about how sorry she was, but I didn't respond. One day, she showed up at my office unannounced. She looked tired, her face lined with regret, but I didn't let that soften me. "Alex, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I was wrong about everything." I crossed my arms, my tone cold. "You were wrong when you chose Rick over me. You were wrong when you lied to me about getting back with him. And now you're here because you've realized he's not the man you thought he was. But that doesn't change what you did." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Lily and Logan. They're the only reason I'm even talking to you right now." She didn't respond, and I turned to leave. "Alex," she called after me. "I love you." I stopped but didn't look back. Love isn't enough, Mom. This journey has been one of the hardest of my life. Betrayal, survival, and the harsh reality that some wounds don't heal. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her, but I've made my peace with that. Thanks for listening, Reddit. It feels good to finally get this off my chest. For more stories like these, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.